Hello, this is Tales from the Mennonite Heritage Archives, bringing you another story about people, places, and events from Mennonite history. I'm your host, Dan Dyck. Many communities have highly visible characters whom everyone knows of, but only a few who know them personally. These unique individuals are often viewed as odd, unusual, eccentric, or enigmatic. In researching this episode, I learned about a man with an intellectual disability resulting from a head injury. Although he displayed some unusual public behaviors, he also had an unusual skill. If you gave him your date of birth, he could, within seconds, tell you what day of the week you were born. I heard about another fellow who only drove a tractor because he didn't have a driver's license. I was driving down a country road in southern Manitoba years ago when I saw a sign on a property, perhaps advertising the residents' matrimonial aspirations. The sign read, Bachelor, followed by a surname. Sometimes these unique individuals are isolated or even ostracized from their communities. Sadly, they are sometimes mistreated. Unique people help define a community and give it character, but their stories seldom become part of historical records. Their legacies are more often left to memory and stories that are passed on orally. Eventually, they fade away. One such character was known locally in Winkler as Flower Annie. She was born Anna Neufeld on January 20th, 1909. According to the online genealogical database Grandma Online, she was part of a family of 12 children. By most reports, Annie Neufeld was poor. She never married. To earn money, she made crepe paper flowers to sell on the street. According to an archived story in the Winkler Times, Annie lived with her bachelor brothers Henry and Peter in a house on 2nd Street. One day she intercepted a woman about to donate an old fur coat to the local MCC thrift store. Annie asked for the coat, claiming she did not own a decent one. The donor handed Annie the coat and wished her the best. Shortly thereafter, wrote the Winkler Times, Annie found a buyer willing to pay $12 for the coat. The Times story also reported that after she died, her brothers found several $1,000s in her dresser drawers. The Winkler Times story was published in 2008, 28 years after Annie died. Most townspeople of her generation have passed on, but some still remember her from their youth. Among them are Grace and Orlando Sukow of Winkler. I spoke with them on the phone.
I grew up seeing her downtown Winkler. Yeah, she always walked up and down the downtown part of Winkler, where the stores were, where people parked to go and get their groceries or whatever. And she would usually go to every car or every person as they would be stepping out of their car and trying to sell her flowers to them.
Orlando didn't grow up in Winkler, but lived there for 2 years while attending Bible school.
One day a friend and I went and, just for the experience, we were going to buy a flower from her. She was quite focused on her sale. It was all business. And so we bought a flower or two from her. It was good.
Orlando and Grace say Annie was known for regularly attending community weddings and funerals, even if she wasn't invited.
She'd always show up. And there was plenty of food, fellowship. So I think she saw it like an open invitation.
Grace's mom, Mary Miller, also joined the conversation.
I know my daughter invited her to her wedding, and she was so pleased that she got an invitation to a wedding, and she bought her some pot holders for a gift.
Okay.
And she had them for quite a number of years, just to remember how pleased she was.
Mary worked in a local grocery store and encountered Flower Annie there. Mary feels that selling flowers was a way for Annie to get some much-needed social contact.
She was such a lonely person. I did really feel sorry for her. She was so friendless. And just to get in touch with people, she made flowers with crepe papers. When people come into town, it was amazing how she would recognize if it was a car from out of town.
Yeah.
And she would approach those people to see if they wanted to buy some flowers. Some were nice to her. They would buy some for her.
Even though she was harmless, people seemed to feel uncomfortable around Flower Annie.
She wasn't mean to people. Why did people bother making fun of her? I guess because she just wasn't your regular lady on the street.
Yeah.
She was just, I think she was very trusting in a simple way. And so I think that caused some of her mistreatment.
Flower Annie's innocent and perhaps naive nature led people to take advantage of her at times. Mary shares a story of how Flower Annie was pranked.
Some people would say, "Oh, if you would make black flowers, then I would buy some." So she would make black flowers, and then they'd laugh in her face. They didn't want them. It was very hurtful what they did to her.
According to Mary, Flower Annie did not enjoy a close relationship with the brothers she shared a house with.
She lived with two brothers, and this one brother, he apparently had been a cook in a camp, and he would come and buy a picnic ham. And then in the afternoon, she'd be in the store, and she'd come and look at the meat counter, and then she'd say, "Oh, my brother bought a picnic ham, but he won't give me any." So I guess they all made their own food.
Orlando wrote a song about Flower Annie so she wouldn't be forgotten.
When she passed away on that weekend, for some reason I was inspired to write a song. And so many people knew her in southern Manitoba, especially those living in Winkler and people who came to shop and stuff here. So, I thought, would she be forgotten? Because I don't know if there was any ceremony of her at, a funeral, or she had few friends or family. So when I wrote the song, I thought it could be written so that if this song ever got out in public or was recorded and we'd be singing, people would say, "Well, who is this Flower Annie?" So in that way, her memory would live on.
They didn't record the song until 10 years after Annie died, but they did perform it at their concerts. Grace said many in their audiences remembered Flower Annie.
Yeah, the older people all would say, "Does anyone remember Flower Annie?" Well, anyone older would all raise their hands, no matter where we were. They knew of Flower Annie, so she was an icon.
After one concert, an audience member spoke with regret about how he had treated Flower Annie.
Well, some guys came up to you one time after we sang and said, "You know what? We feel really bad. We used to throw rocks at her," and now they were actually ashamed of it.
Yeah, he was making a confession, but he was very regretful. Like,
Yeah.
why did we do that?
Yeah, why were we mean to her? She was just trying to sell her flowers.
Orlando and Grace continue to get requests to sing Flower Annie at concerts.
We don't have it on our song list, but people say, "Well, what about that?"
Yeah, I think we put it on our first album in 1990.
Mm-hmm.
But then we had so many people asking, "Can you sing Flower Annie?" And
But the kids
yeah,
that heard it back then are now adults, right? So we'll meet them even in, the superstore.
yeah,
And she'll say, we listened to that when we were kids. We just sang that song.
and their kids ask about it. So
And their kids,
these
yeah.
grown-ups have kids who listen to that song, and so we actually put it on our latest album. I think we did it in 2019. The album's called Calm, but we ended up putting Flower Annie on that one too.
In the absence of an obituary for her, the song serves as a living memorial to acknowledge Annie's humanity.
Even though she wasn't some, great person in the eyes of the world, she was still, for Winkler, she was iconic because everybody knew of this lady who sold flowers downtown Winkler. You kind of looked for her, sort of. Mm-hmm. When people came downtown, it was something, they kind of just looked to see Flower Annie. She was just always there in the song. Like, it's not necessarily directly about, her life that we knew, but just as a story, just imagining her as a child, that she did have a mom who she may have sat on her mom's knee at one time, and it just kind of helps you see her not just as this old bag lady that walked the street, but actually as an innocent child, I don't know. I think that it kind of helps
make her human.
Yeah. Just to realize that she too once was just a little girl, and she grew up, and this is how she ended up, and just make it more personable.
Orlando feels it is important to remember people like Flower Annie.
A friend of mine once said, we have all these gospel songs that we thought were pretty, powerful. But he says, out of all your songs that you did on that album, the song with the most powerful message is Flower Annie, which surprised us a little bit, because he said that was the gospel.
There's a lady in our town. She walks along the street, handing pretty flowers to the people that she meets.
Jesus said, what you do to the least of these, you do to me. So I think that's maybe the message of acceptance and hope, for children, because they hear the song, and it's about a child, and it's a child who's has a dream or a hope. They'll be heard because somebody listens when you pray. That's one of the lines.
Somebody listens when you pray.
So for me, that was kind of the reason I recorded the song, and the reason I think it's important that we honor people like this.
I'd like to be a princess in a kingdom fair, handing pretty flowers to all the people there.
Her mother said, "No, Annie, that is quite a dream. But when you're getting older, life's not always what it seems. You gotta make a living, you gotta work in this land. Well, someday, and you'll understand. Flower Annie, Flower Annie, living in the dreams of yesterday. Flower Annie, Flower Annie, somebody listens when you pray."
In a follow-up email to this story, Grace wrote that Anna Neufeld died in her home on November 27, 1980. She was 71 years old. Her brothers thought she was just tired in her room. When they checked in on her a few days later, they found her dead. No record of her obituary has been found. She is buried in the Winkler Cemetery, where her parents are laid to rest. Thank you to Grace and Orlando Sukow and Mary Miller for sharing about Flower Annie. Thanks also to MHA archivist Conrad Stace for additional research. The Mennonite Heritage Archives is home to many local history books, including the book Living Between Worlds, A History of Winkler by author Hans Werner. That's where we found a photo and a brief vignette of Flower Annie. To see a photo of Anna Neufeld, a link to the song about her, or to listen to this episode again, visit mharchives.ca. If you have memories about Flower Annie, or any other questions or comments about this program, email us at info@mharchives.ca. We'll be back next week with a story about FASPA, an afternoon meal with a long history among Mennonites, and the man who is reviving its notoriety with a food market and catering service in Winnipeg.
I'm Archivist Conrad Stace. Thanks for listening to Tales from the Mennonite Heritage Archives. This program is made possible through support from Golden West Radio and listeners like you. If you want to support this program and the work of the archives, you can find out how to do that on our website at mharchives.ca and click on Support.
I'm your host, Dan Dyck. Tales from the Mennonite Heritage Archives will be back next week with another story about people, places, and events from Mennonite history. Thanks for listening.